think he'll change. He is committed of his own level of service, and
privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty.
Queen for a very long time. And although you kind of know that this might happen.
Camilla's sudden bow to Princess Anne sent shockwaves through the royal ranks. In one swift movement, centuries of tradition seemed to unravel. Gasps rippled across the audience, while King Charles stood frozen, his expression teetering between fury and disbelief. But was this deference a slip of protocol, a silent plea for peace, or a deliberate challenge to the crown itself? The whispers grew louder, the tension unbearable. What followed left the monarchy shaken, and the world desperate for answers.
Is complete nonsense, because the two...
A bow that shook the crown. The monarchy has survived centuries of storms, yet sometimes it is not grand declarations that test its balance, but a single, unexpected gesture. That was the case when Queen Camilla, a woman long scrutinized by the public eye, suddenly inclined her head before Princess Anne. The bow was brief, almost fleeting, but its impact was seismic. Observers inside the palace froze, breaths caught, as though they were watching history rewrite itself in real time. And, at the center of it all, King Charles stood stunned, his face betraying the weight of shock no royal training could conceal. Camilla has always occupied a delicate position within the monarchy. Once criticized, often misunderstood, she fought for years to carve out her space by the king's side. To bow, then, to Anne, his younger sister, renowned for her steel, discipline, and unwavering loyalty to duty, seemed almost unthinkable. Anne has long embodied the crown's no-nonsense strength, the figure who rarely falters, the one courtiers quietly admit has been the monarchy's backbone for decades. For Camilla to lower herself in her presence was to acknowledge not just respect, but perhaps something deeper, a recognition of Anne's authority, her influence, and her permanence in the royal machine. Whispers erupted instantly. Was Camilla's bow a slip of etiquette, a nervous reaction in a tightly choreographed moment? Or was it deliberate, a calculated decision to pay public tribute to a princess who commands respect far beyond titles? Some wondered if it was an olive branch, a quiet attempt to ease tensions that occasionally ripple behind palace doors. Others, more cynical, suggested it was a strategy, a way of aligning herself with Anne's towering reputation at a time when public opinion of the monarchy remains volatile. For Charles, the moment landed like a thunderclap. He has spent his reign carefully balancing modern expectations with ancient tradition. To see his wife bow to his sister blurred those lines in ways he had never anticipated. Cameras caught him frozen, his expression unreadable, an unsettling mix of disbelief, confusion, and something bordering on hurt. To those who know him best, it was as if the hierarchy he had worked to steady shifted under his very feet. The court, meanwhile, was alive with murmurs. Some aides insisted it was nothing, an instinctive nod magnified by the press. But others felt a chill, sensing that what had unfolded was more than symbolism. In royal life, gestures are rarely accidental. Every tilt of the head, every pause of the hand, carries centuries of weight. For Camilla, the bow could either be remembered as a moment of humility or as the spark that reignited unspoken rivalries. And yet, perhaps the most haunting element was Anne herself. She did not flinch, did not waver, did not acknowledge the gesture beyond her trademark composure. That in itself left onlookers unsettled. Was her silence approval, dismissal, or quiet triumph? The monarchy's heartbeat seemed to quicken in that stillness, as though even the walls of the palace were holding their breath. But what do you think her silence really meant? Approval, dismissal, or secret triumph? And how will it ripple through the monarchy? Keep watching to find out. The weight behind a gesture. In the royal world, titles are more than names. They are markers of legacy, strategy, and responsibility, carrying weight that extends far beyond ceremonial duties. And in the shadow of Queen Camilla's unexpected bow to Princess Anne, the meaning of those titles suddenly felt sharper, almost as if history itself had been invoked in that fleeting moment. The monarchy, after all, does not live on spectacle alone. It survives on the deep-rooted symbols that people either respect or resist. No title embodies this more vividly than the Duke of Edinburgh. Its story stretches back to 1726, when King George I granted it to his grandson, Prince Frederick, as a way of distinguishing him within the crowded royal family. From then on, the dukedom was rarely handed out, only bestowed when the monarch believed the recipient could shoulder immense public and private expectations. It was never simply a name, it was a test of duty. That legacy became unforgettable with Prince Philip. After marrying Princess Elizabeth in 1947, Philip was granted the title, but instead of treating it as ceremonial, he transformed it into something with lasting value. Through the Duke of Edinburgh's award, he touched the lives of millions of young people across more than 130 countries, inspiring leadership, discipline, and resilience. He championed science, pushed for conservation long before it was fashionable, and built a global legacy rooted not in pomp, but in tangible impact.
It's been a difficult year for Britain's royal family, from a very public rift to the loss of their beloved patriarch, Prince Philip, who would have turned 100 years old on Thursday.
The name Duke of Edinburgh became synonymous with service, strength, and substance. When Philip died in 2021, the weight of that history returned to the crown. 2 years later, on March 10, 2023, Prince Edward's 59th birthday, King Charles granted the title to his youngest brother. It was a gesture of continuity, honoring both Philip's wishes and Queen Elizabeth II's promise. Edward, along with his wife Sophie, had already spent years stepping into Philip's shoes, championing the very causes he once carried. It felt deserved, but it was never intended to be permanent. In an unusual twist, the title was given as a lifetime appointment only. Upon Edward's death, it will return to the crown, waiting for the next figure deemed strong enough to carry it forward. And that is where the monarchy's subtle tensions come into focus. Every title carries expectations, but few demand as much as the Duke of Edinburgh.
What is evidently quite a party. I also bring you Their Majesty's greetings on this day. They send you their very best wishes, and
to inherit it is to step into a tradition of service, not simply prestige. For Charles, who has always been deeply conscious of how titles and gestures shape the monarchy's public image, the symbolism behind Camilla's bow to Anne would not have been lost. It was a reminder that power within the family is not only about who wears the crown, but about who embodies the spirit of duty that titles like Edinburgh represent. Camilla's gesture may have lasted only seconds, but in those seconds lay centuries of weight. Anne, steadfast and unwavering, has always represented that quiet durability, the same qualities that made the Edinburgh title iconic under Philip. Charles's stunned reaction, frozen in disbelief, reflected not just surprise at his wife's deference, but a dawning recognition that the crown's survival rests on gestures as much as laws, and sometimes those gestures reveal where true strength lies. So what do you think makes Princess Anne the true backbone of the crown, her unyielding strength, or the silent power she wields? Stay glued as the mystery unfolds. The backbone of Windsor. The House of Windsor has endured wars, scandals, victories, and heartbreaks, yet it remains a symbol of continuity. Its very name was born out of crisis. In 1917, during the First World War, King George V made the fateful decision to abandon the family's original German name, Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. At a time when Britain was locked in conflict with Germany, the old name felt dangerous, foreign, and out of step with the public mood. So it was cast aside. From then on, the royals became Windsors, a name meant to sound solid, English, and unshakable. And for more than a century, every monarch, from George V to Charles III, has worn it as both a shield and a burden. That burden has demanded sacrifice. Through abdication crises, national mourning, and fierce public debate, the House of Windsor has had to prove its relevance time and again. Some members crumbled under that weight, but others carried it with remarkable steadiness. And no figure embodies that steadiness more than Princess Anne. Anne, the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, has always stood apart. She never sought the spotlight, yet she became the monarchy's most reliable pillar. While others wrestled with image, Anne focused on duty. Tireless, sharp, and unflinching, she is the one who quietly attends hundreds of engagements each year, who speaks little but delivers much. To the public, she has become a figure of grit. To the palace, she is the immovable foundation, the one who never wavers when others stumble. It was against this backdrop that Camilla's bow took on such explosive meaning. For decades, Camilla has navigated criticism, suspicion, and constant judgment. To see her bow to Anne was not simply about etiquette, it was about acknowledging Anne's iron reputation within the family. It was a moment that laid bare the balance of respect in the monarchy, where tradition and personality collide. King Charles's reaction revealed the depth of the shock. A man acutely aware of history and symbolism, he has long spoken of his desire to slim down the monarchy, to make it leaner, more focused, less burdened by excess. Yet in doing so, he has leaned heavily on Anne's reliability and Camilla's partnership. To see those two worlds meet in such a charged gesture, the loyal sister, bowed to by the queen consort, was to see power dynamics shift before his eyes. His frozen expression seemed to ask, was this humility, submission, or strategy? What made the moment even sharper was its echo of the Windsor story itself. Just as George V reshaped the monarchy with a single decree, so too can gestures reshape its meaning. A bow may last seconds, but it carries the weight of centuries. For Anne, whose life has been defined by unyielding service, Camilla's deference was both a recognition and a revelation. For Charles, it was a reminder that the crown's survival depends not just on laws or titles, but on the personalities strong enough to hold it steady when history presses hardest. Now, what does Camilla's bow really reveal about Anne's unshakable power? And how will Charles navigate this unexpected royal reckoning? You won't want to miss this part. The silent strength behind the crown. At the Platinum Jubilee in 2022, when the late Queen Elizabeth II marked 70 years on the throne, the spotlight should have been squarely on her. The entire event was designed to celebrate endurance, duty, and the continuity of the monarchy. Yet among the carefully staged appearances, one figure drew the kind of respect that required no theatrics: Princess Anne. While others smiled for the cameras or softened their presence with charm, Anne remained resolute, her posture straight, her focus unbroken, her loyalty to service shining in quiet contrast. For many watching, she symbolized the spirit of Windsor itself, steady, unyielding, and deeply rooted in tradition. This is what made Queen Camilla's bow so striking. For decades, Camilla has faced scrutiny, whispers, and judgment, learning how to survive in a family where every gesture is weighed. Her role as queen consort depends on navigating a fine line between support for her husband and acceptance by the public. To bow, however briefly, before Anne was to acknowledge something unspoken, that Anne carries within her a power that no crown or title can manufacture. Anne's reputation was built over a lifetime. Tireless in her work, She has often been described as the monarchy's hardest-working member, attending hundreds of engagements year after year without complaint. She speaks plainly, rarely indulges sentiment, and has built her legacy on consistency rather than spectacle. While others faltered under public pressure, Anne endured. Her composure in crises, her dedication to causes, and her refusal to be swayed by popularity contests made her, in the eyes of many, the steel frame holding up the Windsor name. So when Camilla bent her head toward Anne, the air shifted. It was not only about protocol, but about recognition. In that moment, the Queen Consort appeared to place Anne above herself, a gesture that unsettled the balance Charles had worked so hard to maintain. His stunned reaction, frozen, searching, as though uncertain what he had just witnessed, spoke volumes. For a king who has long sought to modernize and streamline the monarchy, it was a reminder that tradition and personality still dictate its survival. A bow that lasted only seconds carried centuries of weight. For Camilla, it may have been instinct, humility, or even strategy. For Anne, it was a silent acknowledgement of her lifelong service. And for Charles, it was a jolt, an unplanned glimpse of where the monarchy's real backbone may still reside. And just when the palace seemed settled, could Camilla's bow signal a hidden power shift within the monarchy? Stay connected till the end. Shadows of tradition and the shock of change. When Camilla bowed to Princess Anne, the gesture was more than a fleeting moment of deference. It carried the weight of centuries of history. For Anne, a woman defined by discipline and unyielding service, the bow seemed both natural and unexpected. She has long been seen as the steadfast pillar of the monarchy, the one who never sought the spotlight yet never wavered from duty. Camilla, on the other hand, has walked a different path, one marred by controversy, public judgment, and ultimately a climb toward reluctant acceptance as Queen Consort. For King Charles, watching the two most defining women of his life intersect in such a way was more than surprising. It was disarming. To understand why the moment unsettled so many, one must trace the lineage of royal expectations that both Anne and Camilla inherited. Generations of monarchs built their reputations not on warmth, but on restraint. Queen Victoria embodied this tradition most fiercely. To her, children were extensions of duty, not companions to be cherished. Records describe her as cold and emotionally distant, rarely indulging her 9 children in anything resembling tenderness. Obedience was demanded, affection was considered weakness. That rigid outlook became the blueprint for those who followed. King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, later known as the Queen Mother, softened the tone slightly. But even then, their parenting remained bound by formality. Their children, including the future Queen Elizabeth II, grew up in a world where emotional needs were secondary to ceremonial perfection. By the time Elizabeth II became a mother herself, tradition dictated her distance. State duties outweighed maternal presence. Long tours abroad meant Charles and Anne often spent weeks without her, raised instead by nannies and under the shadow of the crown's demands. For Charles, that absence carved deep scars. Sent to Gordonstown, the infamous boarding school in Scotland, he endured relentless discipline and isolation. He would later describe those years as emotionally starved, the kind of childhood where vulnerability had no safe place. It was a pattern that defined him, yearning for affection, yet shaped by an institution that rewarded silence and composure. Anne, though equally shaped by the same parental distance, forged her own resilience. Unlike Charles, she never sought sympathy nor expressed regret. Her reputation became one of stoic strength, an anchor amid scandal and shifting tides. Where Charles absorbed the wounds of neglect, Anne seemed to weaponize them into unshakable duty. Then came Diana, whose presence shattered these cold traditions. She hugged her sons in public, held their hands during official tours, and insisted they see life beyond palace walls. To Charles, her approach was both revolutionary and destabilizing, a challenge to centuries of silence. For Anne, it was perhaps indulgent, a departure from the grit she valued most. And now Camilla, long cast as an outsider, is bowing to Anne. Was it humility, respect, or strategy? For Charles, whose entire life has been shaped by the clash between love, duty, and legacy, the sight was haunting. The echoes of Victoria's sternness, his mother's absence, Diana's rebellion, and Anne's discipline all converged in that bow. It wasn't just an act of courtesy, it was a reminder that in the House of Windsor, every gesture is history made visible, and every bow, a reckoning. So how did one simple bow ignite centuries of royal tension, challenge loyalties, and reveal hidden power within the Windsor family? Stay tuned. A crown built on distance and defiance. For Charles, the sight of Camilla bowing to Anne carried echoes of his past, echoes he could not silence. The bow was a moment of deference, but beneath it lay a century-old pattern. A family where love was too often hidden and where duty eclipsed intimacy. Anne stood as the embodiment of that tradition. She never asked for sympathy, never sought comfort. Her identity was duty itself, unyielding, measured, and proud. Camilla, meanwhile, represented the opposite. A woman who had fought her way through scandal and scorn, reshaping her role until the crown reluctantly accepted her. Watching them collide in one gesture was enough to shake Charles to his core. From childhood, Anne carved her place in the royal family through sheer willpower. She never needed to be the heir. Instead, she built her identity around unshakable discipline, loyalty to duty, and an iron exterior that demanded respect without asking for it. Unlike her brother, Anne rarely sought warmth or approval. Her strength came from projecting certainty. Over decades, this approach earned her a reputation as the monarchy's anchor, blunt, unflinching, and unwilling to bend. Camilla, by contrast, entered the royal stage as an outsider who was never fully welcomed. She endured scrutiny, whispers, and decades of suspicion before finally being recognized as queen consort. Unlike Anne's stern resilience, Camilla's survival relied on quiet adaptability, blending diplomacy with patience, learning when to speak and when silence was safer. Where Anne wielded respect as a weapon, Camilla built it piece by piece, knowing any misstep could ignite old fires of disapproval. And then came the moment that startled the world: Camilla's bow. To many, it looked like deference, but beneath the surface, it was something far more complex. For a woman who had fought so long to be accepted, this act seemed to blur the lines of rank and respect. Was it a calculated gesture of humility, a personal acknowledgement of Anne's stature, or a subtle nod to the fact that strength takes many forms? King Charles's reaction revealed everything. He froze, visibly shaken, not just by the gesture itself, but by what it implied. Charles has always lived between two poles: his sister's granite-like strength and his wife's delicate balancing act. Seeing them collide in such a public, unscripted moment forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth. The monarchy's survival may depend less on strict hierarchy and more on how these two women embody power in different ways. And so, when Camilla bowed to Anne, the gesture did more than acknowledge hierarchy. For Charles, it was a haunting reminder of these competing legacies: the coldness of the past, the rebellion of Diana, the discipline of Anne, and the survival of Camilla. Every bow, every nod, every silence in that moment carried the full weight of history. So, what do you think Camilla's bow truly signified? Humility, strategy, or something deeper? And how will it reshape the royal balance? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.